From a closet, also known as the Jim McCarthy Voiceovers World Headquarters Studio, this is the JMVO Weekly Primer. Please subscribe, rate, and comment via jimmccarthyvoiceovers.com/podcast. This is episode 18 of the JMVO Weekly Primer. The JMVO Weekly Primer is about making your life better through marinating your mind in good stuff. My name is Jim McCarthy, owner, operator, and chief bottle washer at Jim McCarthy Voiceovers, and I believe that as a business owner and entrepreneur, we are bombarded by negativity every single day, and it's the last thing we need. If you want to see your life and business change for the better, consume nurturing, good stuff. Now, back when I started this podcast, I always wanted to do it for fun. I believe that anytime you do something for fun, it intrinsically makes it interesting for other people. I think a lot of people like watching people have fun, which means that anybody who's interesting to me are typically my guests. Now, last week, I went to an event called the Real Estate Blaze. And they had every month they have a great guest that comes in, a lot of whom that I would love to interview. But this one in particular finally took me up on it. And what she talked about is body language. And what we were discussing before, I'm not exactly sure what it's called. And I know it's because everything flies out of my head whenever I think of names and, things and stuff like that. NLP. Nonverbal linguistics, I don't know what the P means, but basically body language. What are we saying with our bodies? And if you know me, I talk a lot about signaling and what do we signal to other people by either not saying something or by saying something, by acknowledging stuff when you are wronged and things of that nature. But Dr. Donna Van Natten has been at this for quite some time, and you are the unequivocal expert when it comes to body language. Am I right?
I'll take that, sure.
There you go. And man, from the moment I first met you last week, I could feel like I was just being examined,
You were being examined, yes.
I was. And
2 feet away, there I was to take it all in.
Look at this little man, this little bald bearded man.
Hey, 4 inches shorter, no apologies. You're okay. You're a big man. That's right.
But immediately you're looking at my glasses, you're looking at the way my shirt, and it's all these things are sending messages of some sort. Am I right?
Absolutely. And it even prompts you to finally say about 6 minutes in, so what do you think of me?
And of course, you got to hate that question by now, because as soon as
I love that question.
Oh, really? Okay. Everybody
I love that
question.
It's a great question. People love to hear about themselves, and it's not in a conceited way, but it's in a curiosity way. I never say you're nosy. You're simply curious.
Mm-hmm. But when you own a business, a lot of people tend to not really understand that their body language is certainly saying something. Like I was saying before, body language is always something I was always intrigued in and curious about, but never really pursued it in terms of learning more about it. So naturally, whenever I have the option to get in front of a person like yourself to say, okay, what am I doing? Because I know some of the little cues and what to do with your hands and steepling. And
that's right. Where are your hands? There you go. Where are your hands right now for the whole show? Right.
I'm going to put them up the whole time.
Nothing to hide.
You go through the entire human body,
I
from
do.
feet to legs to hips, the kind of clothes you wear, the smells you put off, dilation of the pupils, your hair. I mean, I don't think hair has anything to do with that. That's how much I can do.
I think you might be a little biased there, but you have major control right here going on.
I do.
Lots of grooming going on there.
I did trim it down though today.
Did you? Were you doing the holiday stubble? Yeah, that little cut in line that says, "I take care of my facial grooming."
That's right. It implies a jawline.
Oh, I like that. That's good. Yeah. That's right. When in doubt,
shave it out.
Right. Carve it out.
So anybody who's on here right now, please submit your questions. I'll be able to see them right now. Mary Beth Easler just popped up. Donna is awesome. Hi. Saw her last week at the Real Estate Blaze. And I can actually put it up here. So.
Oh, there you are.
There you go.
Donna is awesome. Hey, thanks, Mary Beth.
Right
Great
on.
picture of you, by the way.
That is a great picture of her.
I don't see any thumbs going on. Realtors love those thumbs in their photos.
They like the coat being thrown over the shoulder.
Right.
How does that go? How do you did the perfect impression?
Grab the lapel and swing the head around. Like, buy a home from me. You see my thumbs.
What has two thumbs and could sell you a house? This guy.
Right.
So,
right.
Tell me about how you got into it. What really intrigued you about getting into body language and brought you here to where we are today?
Believe it or not, 30 years ago, I was a junior high teacher, or what you younger listeners might call middle school teacher. And, one of my strengths would be communication, formally in the sense of strengths that are innate in us, or a talent. And so being able to watch behaviors, and grew up with being around a lot of adults, you pick up on a lot of conversations without ever hearing a word. So fascinating behavior in kids from, kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, all the way to college, and then seeing it in the workplace, seeing all the conversations happening. So might as well study it professionally and read everything you can get your hands on. Talk to those who know, and study it formally. So that's what I did. And I love the research behind it, because it's a science. We have these feelings in us for whatever they might be, or that we pick up on, but we don't necessarily quantify it, going, what's happening there? So studying the research behind it, I think, is imperative to say, well, how'd they come up with that? Like we talked about Moravian being one of the founders, or the forefathers, if you will, of body language. And to learn that his 738-55 isn't a one study and here's his findings, but it's a series of studies. And so understanding that it's a rule, or something that you could apply roughly, and it's really withstood the test of time over decades. So it's human behavior, and it's global, and it's globally studied. So and there's not a lot nationally in our country. I would say there aren't hundreds and hundreds that study it, but there's pros. And a few years ago, Netflix had a TV show with Ekman and Paul Ekman's work on it, and people loved it. And it's about them, regardless of industry or stage of life, to understand all the things that it involved with it. Gender and is a big thing in it. I love gender dynamics. I think they're fascinating, of why each gender behaves a certain way or communicates a certain way. So study it formally and help people, because at my core, I am a teacher, and years ago, my mother said to me, and I said, leaving public education and then working for the Department of Ed. And I said, what do I do? And she goes, when I chose to leave it officially, she said, your classroom doesn't have to be, at a school building or in a building. Your classroom is the world. And I've always, respected that. And I always thought, I can always go back. There's always plan B, but this plan A is working out pretty well.
What kind of curriculum can you develop? How deep can it really go? And like, how long would it take for somebody to not master, but get really good at those cues that you discussed last week? I mean, you compressed a lot of information in an hour and a half, 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Imagine that you can probably dive deep into some of these topics for months.
Most definitely. Yeah, especially like when we talked about tone of voice, the 9 elements, some that we're born with, some not, and how that impacts sales, or being on the telephone when you can't see someone, and, from the pitch to the speed of how, we speak and so forth. You can spend hours teaching that to somebody, or explaining the why behind it. But again, I go back to the thousands of studies that support the work, because that's really, when you're in the research doing the human studies, we talked about, I'll give you one example. There's a great study that talks about the power of touch, or haptics, if you will. And they put a $20 bill in a phone booth. And of course, they watch the phone booth, and the person comes in, and what do? What happens to the 20?
I would say first they probably see the 20 and they look to see if anybody's looking at first.
Right. And then what happens to the 20?
What happens to the $20 bill?
Yeah. What would naturally, what would a person do with it once they look around and don't see anyone?
I mean, I'm trying to put myself in those shoes, and what would I do? But the natural reaction is to say, okay, somebody either left. I'm looking for the camera to see if I'm on camera. Because everything
no camera.
Just
a phone booth.
Just a phone booth.
Yeah.
Which, is like just, it's rare that you come across a phone booth these days.
Exactly.
I guess you would say that most people would try and take the $20
Of course you
bill.
take it, right? No one's there to tell you otherwise. So when you came out of the phone booth, somebody came up in this study and said, oh my gosh, I think I left $20 here. And most people said, haven't seen it. Okay. The nature of human, $20, too sad, too bad. Maybe it wasn't there 20. So they repeated the study several times to establish a baseline. And then they changed one condition, the power of touch. So again, they placed the $20 on the next person that came in. When they came out, they came to them and they said, oh my gosh, have you seen it? My 20. But this time they touched their forearm and just ever so slightly, like, excuse me, I'm sorry, I just left a $20 bill. I think I left it in here. Have you seen it? Guess what happened then, Jim?
Their conscience got to them.
Yeah, it triggered that emotion right there, that little tiny amygdala sitting way inside our primitive brain that said, it's your 20, here it is. And almost 70% of the time, which is huge, they gave the money back. So it's those kind of fascinating studies that people spend their whole careers on, that it's fun to read that and pull that out and share that with hundreds and thousands of people that I have the privilege of doing. So fascinating things like that. When they say, the power of touch, you're like, well, what is the power of touch? Well, that's what it is. And it's quite quantifiable. So if you took my 20, Jim, I want it back.
Isn't that the finder's keeper's rule? Hey, you left it there. I mean,
yeah, I'll touch you all right.
you shouldn't have been so neglectful.
Exactly.
So when did this become a business for you? About how long ago where you really started? Let me first ask, how many events are you doing a month, a week, a year?
Anywhere from monthly, quarterly, every now and then, depending on the season and people's fiscal calendar, they get packed in pretty tightly. And then I also have clients, corporations, if you will, primarily, some nonprofits, healthcare, obviously sales is a big deal, that I'll go in monthly and I'll work with their teams. Like I have a fast food client, and so I work all the way from frontline up through management, and then some coaching in there for the owner, some utility companies. And so it's a really broad array, and all the way down to nonprofit that may work with kids who need to do a better job, because kids are so savvy at picking up on all of this. They're much better than adults. They've not been tarnished yet.
It's fun. Well, I think kids, especially of this generation, there's a book out there, write this down. It's called Pendulum. And they talk about, and I actually interviewed one of the co-authors on one of the first episodes of the JMVO Weekly Primer. His name is Michael Drew. And he talked about how we are in a 40-year cyclical shift in societies, cultures, and generations. And I'm not doing it a service by describing what the pendulum is, but essentially we go from 40 years of being a me generation, and then we swing over to being a we-centered generation. So a lot of what you're talking about actually makes a lot of sense, especially with what we are coming up to, living through 1943 all over again in 2023 is what the book
Absolutely.
says.
And we're way too young to even be part of that time.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about the communicative qualities of people back in that era, we're about to go through that again. And it's what you're talking about plays a lot into that, because part of a we generation, we're heading into a we zenith. Essentially, what you're talking about, a lot of the generation that's up and coming doesn't want the hype, the plastic, the posed. They want realness, authenticity, direct. Be honest. And
I'll
with
actually say that the generation coming but actually puts the phone down and wants to engage. Shocking. Now, I can't get my kids to leave messages on phones, like what? You want me to leave a message? I'm like, yes, but missed call's good enough. I'm like, no. So I totally agree. And it's exciting to think that the younger kids want to talk again at you live.
So getting back to, this is a booming business for you. When did it start? Yeah, absolutely. When did it start becoming so for you? When did that transition, that overlap from going from a public school teacher into doing your entrepreneurial thing?
Well, I started the business with two trusted friends back in '08. So 10 years officially this year. And sadly, one of them passed away to a quick illness. And my other friend, colleague, she retired and moved to Europe. So can't beat that. And so I decided to keep it going and really make it thrive, if you will, in the communication processes and evaluation work that we were doing. And I think once in my final year of my dissertation in leadership, that it became very clear that the platform here and human behavior. So, talking about education being important, literally those two very expensive letters, D and R, have really paid off for me because it's credible in the work that I do. And that's anytime that you present on knowledge, your credibility is at stake. So I take that very seriously. And I spend probably about a month every year, usually July, the least crazy of the months. And I study all the latest research that's come out all throughout the body and all different globally in all the publications. And, we have access in research to the real archives that, require you to dive in and see what's going on with the current research.
Right on.
Yeah.
With social media, how does what you do apply to that, especially with people being online, the textual communication, even texting people? Sure. Is there things that you're saying and not saying in those types of messagings? Absolutely. And I think that's when I come and work with the my corporate clients, a lot of it gets lost in that, the screaming in the email to how to speak on the phone. It's cubicle land. And so how do you engage what do you sound like from the walls of your cubicle kind of thing? And so there's always room to improve that. And the sensitivity that we have on, text media, if you will, of the color and the font. And the phone manufacturers know this. They know we're hooked on them. We talked about the dopamine fix. And they know the whole reason we came up with little emoticons or little emojis was because we have this human desire to see a smile, to see a face, to see you stick your tongue out, to see you be happy. And so, or I started with a yellow circle with two dots and a smile, and you're like, oh, good, no one's offended. It's all good. And now we have thousands of them, right? Little thumbs up on those little emojis now. So sure, it's always evolving. The emojis are almost like going back to hieroglyphics. Definitely. Look at Bitmojis. It gets to look like you now. Yeah. We get excited that they put them in situations where like, oh my gosh, look at that. I do it. I mean, I find it pretty amazing. But our generation, my generation, we're quite fixated with the phone, because we had it before and we have it after. Well, there are people out there that say, the phone isn't going to ruin humanity, as everybody's talking about. You have, again, the baby boomer generation, which was a me generation. It was the from 1963 on up to 1983 was the upswing of a me generation. It's funny because I'm listening to that book again, and it's amazing how it's tying into this what we're talking about. The baby boomer generation was, well, they're gonna, this is put the phone down and connect with people. But the generation that's now, it's like, no, this is, I can reach thousands more people. Exactly. Yeah. I think every generation, I've talked about this before in generational situations, is every generation thinks that the one that's in their 20s is just horrible. It's the worst ever. I mean, my father was older and he's part of the greatest generation ever, who clearly pointed out that he is struggling or was struggling with how my kids were possibly going to make it in this now horrible world. But there were a lot of bad things back in that greatest generation. And that's, wow. This is, read that book. I think that's really going to help you. Or definitely. At least, it's definitely going to be a good resource for you, because they talk of the greatest generation, meaning from 1923 to 43, I would imagine, the World War II generation. Absolutely. They were on the upswing of a we. What we're going through now. Okay. So a lot of the things that we're going through are going to start mirroring themselves, and you're going to hear voices coming out of the wilderness that shape the next generation as the pendulum starts losing steam and starts getting pushed down by the next generation coming up. Right. Tim, the nature of being in your 20s. I mean, that's what I try. Didn't we know everything in our 20s? Weren't we ready to conquer and take on? And I was ready. I mean, I did my first year teaching in my 20s, and I remember I'll be the best ever, and I don't need a Parapro, and I can do it all. And I look back and I think, sorry, kids. Damage it too bad. My 12-year-old, she better do a lot until she's 20, because right now she thinks she knows everything.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, well, why you
is
know
that a girl? Is that a girl?
She's a girl. She's our oldest. Yeah. She just turned 12 today, as a matter of fact.
Sorry about that. Happy birthday, though.
I will wish her a happy birthday for you. Yeah, she definitely thinks that she knows it all. And I always remind her, I say, you better do things right now while you know everything.
Exactly. And when you know them, please let me know. And when you stop knowing them, I'm still here.
And let me know when you're 25, when you realize that you don't know jack.
Yeah, and that's, and particularly for males, 25 is key. They go through a second growth spurt, 23 to 25. So my second child is a boy, and he is now 25, and it's lovely seeing him full on adulting 24/7. Well, I wouldn't say 24/7, probably like 22.2.
We have a question from the audience who's watching, Tim Jester.
Hi, Tim.
In a world overloaded with people who are forgetting how to personally connect, do you have any tips or tricks of the trade that might accelerate someone's comfort as you approach them personally?
Right. And as a great question. And as a human, we seek human engagement. So we're very savvy now. If the script on an envelope that comes is a computer that scripted it, or did somebody actually sit down and write it? So I've seen people take their finger and wet the ink to see if it was actually a real pen or a computer pen. So for that, I can say, pick up that phone because you can't beat the rich quality of our voice when you speak with somebody, and even leave a message. And when it comes to print media, a text versus a note card, there's an activity I do in training, and I wish I could say I started it, but I didn't. I learned it many years ago as a teaching technique, and it's the power of writing something about someone, and it evokes such core emotions. And we've really gotten away from that and putting a stamp on it when a text will do or an email reply will do. So it's worth taking that investment. And I think savvy companies know that. They're going back to that, or savvy business people, individuals say, you know what, I'm going to take that 2 minutes and send something in the mail. I mean, the postal service isn't gone yet. So there is some power in that, in the sense of utilize it. So good question.
It's pretty amazing how little people are aware, even like you were talking about, over the phone, making a phone call, leaving a voicemail, the correct ways to go about it. And I think that's what Tim is talking about, either on the phone or in a networking environment. Those cues that make us more trusting and endearing to our audience.
Well, and there's a rule of thumb, and it's if it's of low importance, leave a message, text. If it's of medium importance, pick up the phone. If it's of high importance, show up in person. And we as a human go, oh, you're actually present. So how may I help you now, kind of thing. So when you're physically there, it's a big deal. But if you think about it, that goes way beyond business. Your family wants you present. Your kids want you there, And while we use a screen like this and so forth, we desire human contact. It's why we have skin all over us, and it's sensitive and alive, and it wants to be touched, and it gets warm and cold, and we're a social being. We're a pack animal.
And I think if you really, as somebody who really masters the game of being good at addressing people verbally over the phone or in person, it's just going to set you that much farther apart, because not many people know how to do it. I mean, I coach a lot of creatives on sales and selling, and one of the things I tell them is that, look, whenever we want to do a voiceover for a flower shop, okay, or we want to have an upbeat and happy type of sound, it helps to put a smile in your voice and smile while you're actually talking, because you can hear it come out.
Most definitely. And a sales technique is to smile before you enter the room. Come in smiling. It feels bizarre. You're like, I'm smiling at nothing, and then I'm turning into the doorway. But the first impressions, those first milliseconds really matter.
One of the best guys I worked for was a general manager at a Honda dealership, and I was in the car business for several years, which taught me a lot about body language, about vocal cues, and I mean, so much had been just forced onto me, not only just sales process, but he had a way about him. I mean, the building could be burning down around him, and he would come out of that office.
Warm in here.
Yeah, but I mean, he would come out of his office. You'd never know it.
Right.
You'd never know it, and he had
presence, energy and presence. It's so cute. I just wanted to point out right now, when I was telling you that last story, you went to a great nonverbal. Your hand went to your chin, You're like, and that's authentic evaluation. So I'm actually, remember the cartoons? So you were actually like evaluating what I was saying. So thank you very much.
I was, I knew you were probably going to pick up on that.
Well,
I do that from time to time.
Every now and then.
Yeah, but even in person, if I'm listening to somebody, I'm trying to think if I said,
sometimes cover your mouth.
Mm-hmm. Or
right.
Where I'll cover, and it's, someone had told me, he said, when you cover your nose or you wipe your nose, you're indicating that you just heard something you don't like.
You smelled something you didn't like.
Yeah.
I mean, all our senses are alive and well, and they're all integrate with each other. But super senses, definitely. But usually when you cross over intentionally, you're prohibiting yourself from interrupting what they're saying, or you want to make sure I'm not going to talk and I'm also going to consider it. So here I am. Just when you do this, probably not a good sign. Don't do the Bill Clinton of what, but not me.
Well, I'm trying to think what's going through my head when I do that. I think it's more of just a relaxation. And a lot of people have told me that you have a very relaxed, casual way about you. And I think I do. But, I think, let's see, Tim Jester actually just said something else. It's face-to-face first, phone call second, and always handwritten notes over texts and Facebook messages. I would say typically, Tim, I'm never averse to sending an email. Sometimes I think when you're dealing with C-level people, the quicker the communication, the better, because they don't have the time to read through paragraphs of stuff. So typically that's something I learned in business was keep it brief and succinct. Tell me what you want and I'll consider it. And if I don't hear back from you,
you can leave a text and then a couple of days later, pick up on something that they said to you and cut out an article and put it in there for a magazine, Forbes magazine, something, or print out an article that you saw and mail it to them. A few days later, like, wow, you heard what I said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Affirming that you've listened to them.
Absolutely. Listening is a big deal. And it's not about just hearing them.
I know a lot of people like that. That just, they wait for their turn to talk.
Oh, yeah. And that's part of that whole tone thing, that whole latency time of when I talk and you talk.
I call that the pregnant pause.
Oh, yes.
It's a radio trick, really.
Okay. Well, and in all fairness, some people really struggle, and that part of voice is leaving that dead space in there. And they'll want to fill it in either with ums or ahs, or they'll start talking in because it's uncomfortable. But you probably heard this before of, he who talks first
loses. Yep. Trust me. I've sold many a car after presenting the value, the payment terms.
Oh, yes.
Circle which one works best. And I would just zip my mouth.
Your pregnant pause, you were just stating like nobody's business.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I would look at the paper, look up at them, look at my computer, look down at the paper, all while doing this.
Exactly.
Nodding
like it's all on you now. Which one will you pick? Because you're going to pick one of them.
Yep.
But yes, and the power sells, and every day we're selling. I mean, we sell ourselves, we sell something. It's one of the primary reasons we communicate, because we want something. And
a lot of people don't realize that about themselves. Sorry, I'm not answering just for the sake of answering here.
No, you're validating.
Oh, wow. I'm totally being totally analyzed here. It's so cool.
I'll send you the copay after the show. Okay.
But you're right. And a lot of people don't realize that no matter what, it's a sell or be sold world. That's what I tell people.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with it. Just like when you saw me speak and I used the word manipulate, and it has negative connotation, but truly to manipulate our world makes us successful. All the way from when we're little and lying, to how we avert our eyes, to the little things we say or don't do, and validate it with our nonverbal. And little kids are horrible at it. They're like, did you take that? No. So at work, that looks bad. Did you take that report? I'll stop my head from moving because I need to say no here. So we just become slicker at it, or more savvier,
or just more aware. And that's again another thing, is that many people aren't aware. And I'll get into this now. Maybe some takeaways in terms of what people can be thinking about in a phone conversation, and B, a networking situation where they're actually being seen? Some of the things that people should start, what should they start marinating in their head?
When it comes to a phone conversation, be aware that because we can't see you, our hearing is even more heightened in the sense of hearing the or hearing the background noise. I hear you typing, I hear you eating, I hear TV on in the background. I try to figure out where you are, kind of thing. And so how fast you talk or elevating your pitch, because once we trigger an emotion, all bets change, because inside our reptilian brain, it's right there, Reneke's path of like language. So it's going to come out in our voice somehow. So having great control of that, or asking trusted friends, hey, I notice when you're a little bit anxious, this happens. You speed up your rate of how fast you talk. And so it's knowing those clues and cues, and we're usually not too self-aware of them. So asking a trusted friend, kind of like olfactories, how do I smell? Ask somebody, kind of thing. You may think you smell great. And then in person and networking, it's easy. I think we've mastered you come in the room and you make the eye contact and you kind of stand around and take in a whole landscape. But it's interesting to watch our hands. Where are they? And make sure you put the drink in the left hand so your right hand's not sweaty from the ice. And then where are our feet? Which way are our pelvis or our hips facing with our feet? Because they really tell us where the mind wants to go. And so you might think you're authentically engaged with somebody, but they're one step shy of turning 180 degrees. So you learn a lot about the foot, or even how close people get to each other, proxemics, to figure out the nature of the relationship. Because we know the closer you are with somebody, personally, intimately, you'll be physically closer to them. And so take all of that in, and when you first enter a situation, then just watch, because everybody has a baseline. You have your baseline people that like to touch, or they might have a tick going on, or some type of jingling of the coins in their pocket. But your goal is to engage with them emotionally. So how do you trigger an emotion? That's what I would say.
What was the one thing that maybe you've seen in a networking situation that, like the most extreme case of, wow, I could really do a job on you?
I get asked quickly because it's in a work setting. People will go, boy, I'd like to take you to a party with me, and you could take it all in. I love, and I call it the unforgivingly, the mating and dating stage of when people are hitting on each other and they're flirting and all that kind of stuff, because you get to watch all the wonderful hormonally associated dynamics going on of people hitting on each other or trying to make that connection. And it's so fascinating, from hair play, always on a female, kind of like the lioness in the jungle of, oh, look at me. And people joke, but it's true, to the twirling of the hair. And then you see the men get large, like I'm a healthy specimen, and from the wider stance, and, they puff out their chest, particularly if another male comes along and they size each other up. And it all happens so quickly. I associate most things like the animal kingdom. So who's hanging out of the water cooler or the water hole, and who's sitting up by the tree with nothing to fear, overlooking, surveying his or her land, kind of thing. And seeing all the animal dynamics, if you will. I'm always quite amused by that. And I've been to a couple of parties when they're like, what's that one doing? What's happening there? What's happening there? I'm like, okay. I'm like, watch the feet, watch how they're turning, now watch the eyes, are they crinkling up now? Or the minute he turns his back, are they now talking about him? Because it's pretty obvious when you become very intentional about it. And that's what we're talking about, is being intentional about it versus, I don't know, I'm just here. And women, I will say women are really good at it. When they want to be intentional, and men go, I know. She points out everything. Yeah, we pick up on it pretty early.
I think men do too, to a certain extent.
They do. They're a little fun, a little more forgiving.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a narcissism thing going on for us.
Well, if you think at our core, we're biological beings that need to reproduce. And so we have a certain time in our lifespan to do that, and how we want to find other healthy people. And so there's this natural, competition, if you will, for the fittest, to find that along, and then meeting all the criteria you're supposed to meet in that, all wrapped up into one person.
Fun stuff.
And by the way, no competition, of course, from the same gender or the other gender, depending. Right.
So was there ever an extreme case where it was just, that you can recount, tell a story in terms of somebody you've seen? I mean, this is almost stuff that you could put on Instagram on a daily basis of people that you run across that could,
I think I see a lot of faux pas in how people dress. What we put on our bodies is our choice every day. And I'm the first to say it is your right to wear whatever you want to wear. And, I am not the attire police. However, we sure have a lot to say with what people wear, from cleavage to midriffs, to the tightness of the clothes and what might be hanging out, to an exposed rear end. And so I think that that's fascinating. And you learn a lot about people economically. We know that there's an association of wealth and expectations to middle class to poverty about dress, being individual or fitting in. Those of us in, squarely planted in middle class say, "What are you wearing tonight?" kind of thing. And, it's a great, not everybody knows those rules though. And then that's why sometimes you see somebody show up and you're like, "Oh my goodness, look what they're wearing." And it's usually not favorable. So, things like that are fascinating to watch.
When I worked at Mercedes of Nashville, one of the things that I noticed was you couldn't judge a person by what they were wearing in that business, because even though we were dressed like a ragamuffin, that business was like, if you assume one thing, quite often it'll be the opposite. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people would, you would curb qualify them is what it's calling.
Sure.
And it turns out the guy is worth a couple $1 million and can stroke a check for anything you have on your showroom floor.
Right. Well, how about language? What did you notice in language? How was their grammar?
How did they handle themselves and everything?
Right. How did they speak? Was it correct word choice, complete sentences, vocabulary?
Not that, I don't recall how they spoke. I just remember thinking to myself, just don't judge book by its cover, because you never know.
Right.
And I tell creators.
Indicators. You'll always see the indicators, and some are very intentional, and it works both ways. You'll see someone who struggles really try to dress up. It might be the only suit that they own, but they know that rule to play. Whereas you might see somebody with absolute wealth saying, "I don't have anything to prove, and let's see how they treat me like an average person." But they also know those rules too. They know not to wear that to the country club for an afternoon of golf or 9 o'clock tea time kind of thing.
And there's actually a meme out there that puts William, it's Bill Gates and the guy from the Warren Buffett.
Buffett,
And they're both standing next to each other, and they say that their clothes on their bodies at that particular point probably total no more than $100. But in contrast with all the peacocking entrepreneurs that are out there these days, because being an entrepreneur is such a hot thing to do now, that's where, all the name brand stuff and their clothes probably total $2,000 that's on their body.
Right.
And it's like, it's billionaires versus wannabe millionaires.
Exactly. And a little bit of Warren Buffett, as you know, he's extremely drives the old car, has that greatest generation mindset. Took it with him all the way through. Made conservative, great choices. But stayed humble in the Midwest because that's his roots.
Yeah, and Bill Gates to a certain extent too. I guess I don't know too much about him. I always tell people about signaling. Obviously, everything that you do. There are certain people in my life that would let people speak to them a certain way or treat them a certain way. And I always tell people, look, whether you address it or not says something. Even by not saying anything, you're still saying something.
Absolutely.
And you're allowing them they're making an impression and an opinion forming an opinion in their head that it's okay to do that to you.
Got it. Right. And I think we also call those, you call them, what do you call them?
What's that? Curb qualifiers?
Signaling. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're like scripts, things that people say that they're aware or not, but they're used to that recording going in like, okay, it's one of my scripts. And, we hear those all day long, and particularly how about people feel about themselves and others. Yes.
I truly feel hugely sorry for any salesperson you get in front of.
Hey, now.
Not because of what you do, but if they're trying to sell you something, my gosh.
Yes. We usually have a conversation pretty quickly. Really? That says, yeah. And I usually might say something like, I know you think you're going to sell it to me today. So let's just go there, and you won't, because it's not in my nature. be impulsive that way, particularly with money.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
Does it ever work out that you buy it that day?
No.
Never.
Nope.
Now, at that point, is it a pride thing, or is it just, sometimes the deal's just that good?
No, I think I just know me, in the sense of the buyer's remorse, or that little voice inside that says and I'm actually a firm believer that put a little time in there and it'll work out like it's supposed to, kind of the higher power thing, if you will, the energy.
I used to hate hearing that.
I know.
If it's meant to be, I'm like, just get down here and buy the damn car.
I'll make it meant to be. Come on down.
Come on down. What do we need to get you back?
I mean, there's constant sales and so forth, but again, it's a transaction of some sort. So they have a job to do, and I have a job to do.
Do you do a lot with auto dealerships or automotive groups?
No, I do. I do a lot with realtors, like you obviously saw, fast food, utilities, and different banking. Bankers are fun. Yeah, they're a fun bunch because they have so many regulations that they get excited when they don't have to be regulated. Yeah, definitely. So
you see, right now I'm sitting here. You may not notice this, but I have my arms crossed. But
I know. I could. You can tell.
Can you? Okay.
Yeah, your shoulders shifted. They changed.
Yeah, but it's a comfort thing. It's like, and I'm not really trying to say anything. It's just I'm just comfortable sitting here like this.
It is. It's called a baseline, and a lot of people like to sit like that as a baseline. Particularly those that know you would think that would be normal, right? But it's never just one behavior. It's a cluster of three. Minimally to see. Okay, I just saw that. His arms are crossed. Is he defensive? No, he's smiling and relaxed. And he's all crinkled up here, and he's doing this little thing like a quiet laugh, and so you have to take it all in and not just being defensive. And how tight your arms are covering your chest.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're just below the moobs. So.
Well, and that's probably a discussion for a different podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of moobs, I mean, there's a lot of not just men but women. You brought up cleavage the other day, just now, and I saw a video the other day, which is very interesting, and it was kind of a parody type video where these two people were coming out from a yoga class, and she had a low-cut shirt on, and they were talking about yoga, and he was kind of, they were doing the dance in a way, and he happened to glance down, and she was like, oh, my God.
He didn't happen to glance down. He intentionally glanced down, like we all do.
Did you just totally look at my breasts? And she starts taking him to task on it, and he does an excellent job of saying, look, if you're going to dress that way, I'm going to look, because those give me comfort. You got to remember, for 18 months, I suckled from one of those, and yes, forgive me if it has some sort of life-giving qualities that make so much, the way they did the video was just brilliant.
That was good. Yeah, absolutely. And just to let you know, women also look. And now I will say that women tend to judge other women. And usually if you see a lot of that, it's usually not favorable. And again, it goes back to the gender thing of like, why are you choosing to show that? And again, it goes back to you purposely put things on your body, every day. You weren't wearing your pajamas out. Some people do. But so you chose to wear that sports bra. And so you know what it looked like. And if someone's taller than you, they can see right down. So why are you offended if everybody looks when we're in eye contact culture and we have to take in our entire landscape? From women have a nice wide peripheral, so we don't have to turn our heads as blatantly as men to take in the entire scene. But we all do that. You look around. You go in, and the first thing you do is you look around. And so if I happen to see something that's looking not the norm, then we look a little longer. And so, and breasts are sexual. There are body parts that are sexual on us as far as, back to that mating and dating stage. And so we tend to look at right away. Just turn TV on and you'll see it all the time. We spend a lot of time on them.
No, I never do. I mean,
of course you don't. You would never notice that.
I'm never rude that way. If anything, I'll probably give it away by the fact of how hard I'm making eye contact with
right,
somebody.
And you're looking at the sky going, look at the clouds.
No, I actually really make eye contact. Whenever I'm sitting and she's got them, they're hanging out. Yeah. I'm literally like drilling into her eyes, and I'm sure I'm communicating. I am so trying hard not to look down.
Because I normally wouldn't be staring at you like this, but I'm staring at your face today because I'm going to stare at something else otherwise.
As soon as you look away.
Yes. Just turn back. Just turn back and save yourself. Right.
Yeah. And I'm a big proponent of calling things as I see them and saying, okay, you knew you came out and you were doing something today and saying something with these.
Yes.
You had to know.
And that's really what's the intention? That like most things, what's the intent? Was it to make her feel better with them, that they're new, if you will? Was it that she had an obesity issue earlier or a late blooming issue, or she'd been complimented before and liked that type of attention? Was she hoping something to be noticed at work? I mean, that's where you try to get into what's the behavior behind it.
Even this, when the social media selfies, when they take them from a top down position, they're hiding something. Well,
and a lot of people do that because it changes the jawline. Remember, we had the jawline discussion of why you shave right there, right?
They're
so you
hiding
up like that, elongates the neck, going, I'm fit.
Now I notice whenever I have a headshot done, I get my picture taken, that if I smile, my eyes get squinty, and I go, okay, I know that about myself. I've practiced this. I need to get a really good headshot, because typically all of them, I always try to laugh whenever I do a picture. So I'll conjure up something. I go so it looks like I'm happy.
Sure.
But what I hate about it is this. So I try to go.
That which makes you look crazy, but that's okay. That's why you are where you are right now. So it's been an effective photo session.
Well, but I mean, that's probably the best way to do it, because
we need to see the crinkles. I mean, we need to see, the genuine smile involves these muscles. So we have to see the little crow's feet. We want to see the line on the lid. And while we hate it, it does, reaffirm authenticity versus I'm happy you're here.
Yeah, it's a natural smile, and I also hear my wife in my head, because she's always made fun of my smile, because I have what we call McCarthy lips, and they're like pencil thin, and
they disappear.
She's got the voluptuous big lips. So it's funny. I went to New York last month. I think it was last month. Took the family up there, and we're from New York originally. And you want to talk about you would go to town up there and just.
Oh, I love New York. I take it you were in Manhattan.
Yeah. We took the kids to Manhattan, took them.
It's a little visually stimulating up there.
It is. Oh, totally. But it's funny. Sometimes I'll get into a mode where I will people to look at me. I'll just say, I'll be sitting at a stoplight and I'll see someone next to me and I'll go, look at me. Look at me. And I try and will them to look at me.
You rev your engine and everything?
No, I just sit there and I try and do the whole Jedi mind trick thing. I'll sit there. I was doing that in New York. As people were walking past us, I would make eye contact intentionally. And I know for New Yorkers, it's so uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And that's part of my intention, is to make them uncomfortable, but I don't know what that's.
Oh, right. And it's a game changer when you make eye contact, because there's some type of relationship potential right there when we look at people. Definitely.
Well, it depends on if you're looking at them like this.
Which is probably not a healthy thing right on the streets of the city. Okay.
The De Niro.
That's
or
right.
you just, but when I was looking at him, I was like,
there you go. Happy he posed no threat to me. You bet. Yeah. No threat, no harm.
And if they met my gaze, I would go, hi, how are you? And they'd be like, what the hell's wrong with that guy?
Now that's because you're in New York and there's 15 million of them and they're like, what do you want? Go away.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the New York salutation is hi, how you doing? F you want.
Yeah. You're like, okay, I'm going to listen to the tone on that. It's non-threatening.
What's your problem?
That's right. Backed up by a validating, nod.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
What are you looking at?
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple more takeaways. When people, and I know we kind of briefly covered this, we're walking into, let's say, First Friday, which is a Williamson Chamber event. Every first Friday of the month, there's about 120 people there. I come walking through the door. Okay. What's the first thing I need to be cognizant of?
Well, are you smiling?
Mm-hmm.
What's your clothing when you're walking in? Is your jacket open?
Mine's always open because
are you groomed? Right. Are you groomed? How are your hands relaxed? Do we see your hands? Because a lot of times, particularly males, the hands go right to the pockets, the pocket of safety. right by the loins, just in case. Very, very basic, very primitive. And so are they open and relaxed, I think is one thing you have to consider, because a lot of times when someone enters a room, you'll see the hand go right to the pocket. And that's or you'll see a cross-body behavior. You're suddenly checking your watch cross-body, you're checking your cufflinks, you're readjusting yourself because suddenly 100 people go, who just entered? Are they safe? Am I safe? Definitely. So yeah, be aware of how you look when you enter the room, and because you're taking everything, and also to figure out where am I going to go next.
What should one do with their hands? You're standing.
Right. It's a hard thing, right? Steeple away, right? Mm-hmm. You want them down at your sides typically, and an open, relaxed palm, palm gesture, nothing clenched or anything like that. And it shows that you pose no threat right away. Mm-hmm. Relaxed and shown hands. And then you have to figure out which direction you want to go. And people will tell pretty quickly because they're going to look at your eyes, your sclera and your pupil to figure out, what are you looking at? What are you looking at?
You got a problem. You're looking at me.
Right. I'm looking at you. Right. You're like, am I going to go that direction or am I going to go this direction? So they're going to see where you're going to go. And they're going to take in your pace. Or if you move over and you're scanning or you're breaking out in a sweat, like uncomfortable. Or
what's an exercise someone can walk through in a situation like that? Maybe somebody who's not too used to the networking thing and they're kind of getting into it. I found that one of the best things that they can do is to approach somebody they would otherwise be uncomfortable talking to.
Okay.
Is that something that you would recommend? I mean, I believe that growth comes from discomfort. And typically,
that's why you probably doesn't battle anxiety either. Ideally, you want to find somebody and practice it. Once we practice something, just like from your first podcast to 18 times later has been a big change of how you see yourself on the screen and so forth, and your pace and all that. If you can find a trusted person and try that out in other settings, it'll benefit you. Because then that person will say, this was great, and they'll validate it. Or I noticed that you walked really fast. Or you only stared at me the whole time you walked over versus scanning the room. And a lot of times, when you're in the moment right there, it's hard to self-assess. And that's why we leave later going, oh, gosh, oh, God, I made a fool of myself. Or, oh, I'm so embarrassed. Or, well, that oh, my gosh, I tanked. I couldn't talk to anybody, or whatever it may be. So a trusted person who ask them to help you. People love, I call it the 4 magic words. It's called, I need your help. And it's very hard for somebody to say, not my problem. Or people say, oh, what do you need? And they'll help you. And there's nothing wrong with that.
So with what you're talking about with some of the case studies that you've worked with, what was the most profound change? What was the most profound thing ever said to you after working with somebody?
Egad, that's a hard one ever. It's one of those extreme words. What was the most profound thing ever said to me? I think
impactful change.
Well, I think what's funny is, you run into people that you've seen before over time and so forth, and they might grab their glasses off their head, or they might stop and go, and they'll remember something that I call it I'm half mesmerizing, half terrorizing, but I'm entertaining and entertaining and educational. I believe that that's a huge component while having a great time. And it's so validating that they'll remember something that I said, and I may have forgotten over time, but I have a pretty good facial recognition in the sense of the name that goes, like the 12 people that I pointed out last week, I can remember their names. And so that really helps. And as soon as they kind of give me a little clue, I'm like, oh, you were the one with the glasses, and that kind of thing. And or people will come and they say, oh, I went and got new glasses, or I changed this, or I bought this, or I stopped doing this, gesture with my suprasternal notch. And I'm like, thanks. So it's such a compliment to me, because it really is that. It is a compliment to really helping them. And I think that goes back to my intention is to help. And so that's what I find one of the most profound things is the takeaways that people get from it.
I think a lot of what and I'm going to, for the people that are watching or listening, what Donna's referring to is we had somebody in the audience last week who was clearly uncomfortable and immediately put his hands to his neck and started fidgeting with his buttons on his shirt, which was an indicator that he was not comfortable at all.
It was uncomfortable, right? So this is a vulnerable area on us, and women all tend to play with a necklace like this. If you hit a trigger, it's a trigger, maybe telling us something about a loved one or things like that. Or a man might start to play with his collar or something like that, and it's a safety mechanism. It's a self-soothing, if you will. And a lot of these behaviors are self-soothing. We'll pet ourselves. We love to be petted. We remember, from being an infant of what felt good, and from hair play to chewing, something to the mouth, is that oral fixation, if you will, going from a breast, from a nipple or a bottle to chewing on fingernails to thumb sucking, so there's a lot of sensitivity going on here. So watching people with the relationship of their hand to their mouth, of how they feel, or chewing on the lip, a lot of these self-soothing behaviors that we can pick up on.
I was in a situation once, and I'm always trying to figure out. I'm a big proponent of audit how you come off. Be in a constant
check thyself.
Right, and be self-aware. I had a meeting with, at the time, I kind of perceived them to be high rollers. They were worth a lot of money, and they forged their own lives and all those, and they kind of had that stature of confidence and bravado, and kind of borderlining into arrogance. So we went down and met with them. And at one point in time, I'm a big listener. I'll just sit there and listen to people talk. And I just kind of, I'm doing this, just listening to them and watching it go back and forth. At one point, one of the guys says, "Well, Jim, what do you think?" And I just looked right back at him. I said, "I'm not sure yet. I take it all in, then I come to a conclusion. The jury's still out." It really bothered him.
Do you think it's because he wanted you to agree with him?
I don't know. He just wanted to know what my thoughts were, and that I should probably have them as fast as he did. I'm like, no, I take it in. There's a lot of information coming at me. I unpack it over time, then I form an opinion.
You're waiting for the universe, see? Your favorite sales technique.
Yeah. I mean, it's meant to be for that. I come back.
And that's a time thing. I mean, I conclude a lot of my seminars about, the famous words of Warren Buffett, 86,400 seconds. We all share them. And so time is a fascinating thing in our society. And so putting a little bit of time, and that's one of the problems, is where we have hit that. Did you get my email? Did you get my text? Immediate. Whereas what happened to a little bit of time, and I always say, like, the curve, the bell curve, this probably isn't going to happen in 2.5%, and this isn't going to happen in 2.5%, the best and the worst, but it's going to fall squarely in the middle of that beautiful curve of it'll be okay.
Yeah, not typically, but a lot of people. But I mean, what you do is basically teaching people how to be self-aware and audit themselves at all times.
Most definitely, to navigate the world more successfully for wherever they are. And it can be work relationships or personal ones. They're all interpersonal.
Where can people find more about you?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. Love that. I have a book. I think you know that. I actually have it. It looks like this. I'll put it in front of me. It's me.
Nice.
It's called Scrimmage, and it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And the book wasn't written because was my lifelong desire to be an author. It was written because there was a need to learn about ourselves and to go through the data and comb through it and come up with practical ways and tips to help ourselves. And then my website is bodylanguagedoctor.com. The doctor is DR. And I have Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and the @Donna Van Natten and the hashtag Image Scrimmage and all that great social media stuff. And so I'd love to hear from people and love to always answer questions or however I can help or push somebody in the right direction so that they understand it. Because I can regurgitate all day long. I have the luxury of doing that, but I want it to be in somebody else's head so that they can share it back out and learn
Absolutely.
from it.
And are you, and obviously, are you on Instagram?
I am on Instagram.
Okay.
Probably not the one I go to first, but I'm there.
That's an important one. That's a big one right there. And it's you'd be believed you'd probably be amazed at how much business you can get off of it.
Well, I'm sure you're going to Instagram this, and then I'll have something,
Actually, what I'll do right now, I'll take my my pseudo selfie here. And I got to put it on Instagram. Okay, this is taking way too much time.
Okay, make sure your hair looks good.
Yeah, my hair. I don't even know if I can get myself in the picture, but I try to do this with every episode. There you are. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah. And I'll say, hey, this is coming up here soon. How do I find you business? What are you looking for? How can we connect you with people that I know that may need what you're doing?
If somebody has an event that they're planning and they need a speaker, or they have some education that they need, continuing education hours, I can handle a lot of those topics. If somebody would like me to come in to work with a team in their company, that'd be fantastic, because a lot of times it's easier for me as a third-party entity or a vendor, if you will, or a 1099, to say it versus somebody at the company. Because sometimes I talk about the hard stuff, how people smell, how people look, how people think, how people behave. And it's better that I be the deliverer of the message, because there's a lot of feelings involved. So all of those avenues would be great, since you asked.
I would really like to connect you. Ever hear of a person named Brad Lee?
Not Bradley. I know several Lees, but not a Bradley. Where is that person?
I had him on episode, I want to say 15 or 16. He runs a company, excuse me, called Lightspeed Virtual Training.
Okay.
And that's someone I think that you should probably investigate as an option to offer what you do as a virtual training course.
Yes, and that I have been approached on that before. The frustrating part is that a lot of the communication processes that I do are human, so they're in front of somebody. So I appreciate the virtual platform for some educational opportunities, but we can't reach all of them, because that's the thing of online education is fantastic, but it can never replace, if you will, as you know, it can't replace being in front of somebody.
It's another option, another possible revenue stream for you, though.
Oh, there you go. Thank you so much.
And scaling yourself and duplicating yourself.
Yes, I'll need to duplicate myself. That's a lot of duplication. That's a lot of person.
How do you scale this thing that you're building currently? Are you just kind of keeping it just you, or you're building a team? Like, what's next?
I have a team for some things, depending on what the work is, particularly the go in and work with a client monthly, bi-monthly, or if we're at a conference and there's concurrent sessions, things like that, then I bring a team in, and I have men and women with experience in different, specialties, if you will, depending on what the need is.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. We've done an hour so far. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
An hour is great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. It's been completely enriching. I've had a lot of comments, which is good. Typically I don't, but it also comes down to what time this thing airs and stuff. So, of course, if you're watching or listening to the JMVO Weekly Primer, you can subscribe, you can like, you can rate, you can comment. And, of course, I encourage all of those things. If you want to get in touch with Donna, I'll have all of her information down below in the description areas, the website, the hashtags, and also the handles for Instagram and Twitter. Donna, was this not the best podcast experience you've ever had?
You know what? I'll have to say it is like my all-time favorite podcast I have ever done.
Have you done any at all? I mean, I'm being serious here.
No.
You need to start guesting on podcasts. You bring a lot.
Well, you set the bar. You set the bar, Jim. So
so everything from here.
Yeah, it's all going somewhere from here. Exactly.
There's nowhere to go but up from here.
That's right. Put your heels on and step on up the stairs.
Anybody who's listening to this, the first minute I met Donna, I just knew that, she was just a fun person, that we would hit it off and get along. And I'm like, I got to have her on my podcast. And I pursued it and made you.
I appreciate that.
And anybody else that needs to have someone like this, you're great. So I will definitely be shouting your message from the mountaintops and helping you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you come across people that need events all the time. So to me, I don't care if the crowd is 50 or 500 or 1,000 or 5,000. I get excited to get in front of people. Most people panic. I'm like, the more, the better.
You need to get in front of Grant Cardone and Gary Vaynerchuk and start getting those big events like the 10X Growth Conference.
I think that's your way of saying, I want to help you with this, Donna.
I can certainly connect you. I mean, I can do what I can. I mean, I'm still working on them from my end to do their voiceover stuff. I have done it in the past. It's just actually getting paid for it would be nice.
Well, send me whatever I need to do. I appreciate that, because I really believe that particularly women in the workplace, it's always great to connect with a male sponsor, if you will, that helps move the bar along. So I appreciate that, Jim. Definitely.
Well, definitely look Donna up. And of course, please subscribe, like, rate, and comment on the podcast. And let me know what you think. I'd love to hear back any guest ideas or things I should be talking about to marinate your mind in good stuff. Ways to move the ball forward down the field. Thanks again, Donna, for being on the JMVO Weekly Primer.
Thank you, Jim. It was wonderful. I appreciate it. And best to you.